She picked up the plate of salmon and poured it over the head of one of the most powerful women in New York. In that moment, Grace Mitchell knew her life was over. She had just humiliated Eleanor Blackwood, mother of the infamous Nathaniel Blackwood, whose family controlled half of Manhattan's elite circles. The restaurant went dead silent. Servers froze. Diners stared in horror. But what Grace did not know was that someone was watching from the shadows. Someone who would send a video of this moment to Nathaniel Blackwood himself. And his reaction? It would change everything. Within 48 hours, Grace would lose her job, receive death threats, and watch her 14-year-old brother get kidnapped by dangerous criminals. She thought standing up for her dignity would cost her everything. She never imagined it would lead her to the one man who could see her soul. This is the story of a waitress who refused to bow to power, and how one act of defiance brought her face to face with a love she never expected. This story will show you that your dignity is priceless, that standing up for yourself can open doors you never knew existed, and that sometimes the person who seems like your greatest enemy can become your greatest blessing. Stay until the end, because Grace's journey will remind you of your own strength. For 7 years, Grace Mitchell was a model employee at Monarch, a top Manhattan restaurant. She had never received a single complaint. Now, at 27, she knew the place inside and out, earning respect from everyone for her perfect service. But she carried invisible burdens. Her parents had died 3 years prior, leaving her with crushing medical bills from her mother's illness. She was also raising her 14-year-old brother, Noah, on her own. Every dollar she made went to his private school tuition, helping him chase his dream of becoming a doctor. One Thursday night, everything unraveled. Eleanor Blackwood, mother of the infamous Nathaniel Blackwood, entered with her elite friends. The Blackwood name was a whispered legend in New York, a symbol of immense wealth and a darker, unspoken influence. From the start, Eleanor attacked the service with a voice loud enough for others to hear. "The silverware is wrong," she declared, despite it being perfectly placed. "We have been waiting for 5 minutes. Where is the bread?" Grace appeared with her professional smile, holding a basket of warm bread. "Good evening, madam. I am sorry for the wait. This just came from the oven." Eleanor inspected a piece with disgust. "From the oven? It feels like a stone. This place cannot even serve decent bread." Her friends offered weak, uncomfortable laughter. Grace kept her composure, a skill she had mastered. "I can bring another variety if you would like. We have several choices. Do not bother. Your incompetence has already spoiled my appetite." Eleanor shoved the basket away. Grace retrieved it without a hint of frustration, feeling the eyes of other diners on her. She had handled demanding patrons before, but this woman's hostility was different. The entire meal was a series of complaints. The soup was too salty, the wine was the wrong temperature, the forks had spots only she could see. Each comment was louder and more personal. "This waitress has no training," Eleanor announced to her friends, making sure Grace could hear. "I am shocked she is still employed." Humiliation burned Grace's cheeks, but she continued her work. She had to keep this job. Things escalated when Eleanor intentionally spilled wine on her own expensive white Chanel dress. "Look what you did!" she shrieked, pointing a finger at Grace. "You clumsy fool! You bumped into me!" "Madam, I was across the table," Grace responded, her voice calm but firm. "I never touched you. Are you calling me a liar?" Eleanor stood up for dramatic effect. "This dress is worth more than you make in a year." The restaurant grew quiet as everyone watched. A hush fell over the dining room. Richard Porter, the manager, rushed over, his face tight with anxiety. He knew who the Blackwoods were. He knew what they could do. Angering them was not an option. "Mrs. Blackwood, please, let us handle this." "Grace, apologize to the lady right now," Richard ordered, his voice shaking. Grace stared at her manager, unable to believe him. After 7 years of perfect service, he wanted her to lie. "Mr. Porter, you know I did not do this." She spilled it on herself. "Grace." His voice was strained. Apologize now, or you are fired. A victorious smile spread across Eleanor's face. She crossed her arms, savoring the moment. This was the public humiliation she wanted. I am waiting, she said, tapping her foot. At that moment, something inside Grace broke. It was not the embarrassment. It was the raw injustice. For 7 years, she had served with dedication, only to be told to lie for a woman whose money and power made her feel invincible. Grace looked at Eleanor's dinner, a plate of grilled salmon. She made a choice that would alter her future. You want my apology? Grace asked, lifting the plate. Here it is. She then tipped the entire meal over Eleanor Blackwood's head. Sauce coated her platinum hair, while vegetables slid down her silk dress. Pieces of fish clung to her diamond necklace. Eleanor was frozen in shock for a few seconds. The restaurant was completely silent. Servers stopped in their tracks, trays in hand, their eyes wide. Nobody had ever stood up to the Blackwood family. Everyone knew this would have serious consequences. If you are enjoying this story, please tap the like button and share it. Subscribe to our channel so you do not miss the next part. Your support helps us continue. What Grace did not realize was that Nathaniel Blackwood himself was about to see a video of this moment, and his response would surprise everyone. Then, Eleanor's scream shattered the quiet. How dare you, she shrieked, as sauce dripped from her chin. I will destroy you. I will sue you until you have nothing left. Do you have any idea who I am? She turned to the manager with wild eyes. Call the police. I want her arrested. I will take this restaurant to court, and I will shut it down. Richard Porter was pale and trembling, unable to speak. Eleanor's friends tried to clean her off with napkins, but she angrily pushed them away. Do not touch me. Her furious gaze was locked on Grace. Through it all, Grace felt a strange sense of calm. The storm had broken, and now there was only peace in her chest. She slowly untied the apron she had worn for 7 years. She folded it with care and placed it on the table. Mrs. Blackwood, Grace said, her voice steady and clear. You can sue me. You can ruin my career. You can use all your family's power against me. But you cannot take my dignity. I will not apologize for something I did not do. For 7 years, I have worked here and treated every customer with respect. Tonight, I learned that some people think money buys everything, even a person's self-worth. They are wrong. She faced Richard Porter. Mr. Porter, thank you for the past 7 years. But I cannot work for someone who protects bullies. With that, Grace turned and walked away. Her back was straight and her head was high. She crossed the marble floor with deliberate steps, each one a quiet statement of her own value. The other diners watched her, some with admiration, others with fear for what would happen to her. Her steps echoed in the silent room. In the darkest part of the restaurant, a man had observed the entire scene. Marcus Chen, Nathaniel Blackwood's most trusted man, sat alone with his drink. He was there to watch over his boss's mother, who often caused trouble. But in his 10 years with the family, Marcus had never witnessed anything like this. A woman with nothing just challenged the Blackwood family. She had no wealth, no influence, and no connections. Yet she faced Eleanor Blackwood and emerged like a victor. Marcus quietly activated his phone, having recorded the entire confrontation from the moment the harassment began. He swiped his finger, sending the video to Nathaniel with a simple text. You need to see this. Marcus then stood, dropped cash on the table, and left the restaurant. He walked away in the opposite direction from Grace. Behind him, Eleanor was still screaming threats of lawsuits and retaliation. But Marcus understood that her anger was not the main event. The true story was in the eyes of the woman named Grace. She showed no fear, no hesitation, only a fire he had never seen in anyone who defied the Blackwoods. He suspected Nathaniel would be very interested in this woman. The moment Grace stepped outside the Monarch, the November wind hit her like an icy hand. All the courage she displayed inside the restaurant instantly evaporated. Her legs began to tremble, a weakness spreading from her knees until she grabbed a streetlight to stay upright. The adrenaline that fueled her defiance was gone, leaving a dizzying emptiness in its place. Grace gasped for air, trying to calm her racing heart. What had she done? She had poured a meal on the mother of one of New York's most powerful men. In one impulsive move, she had just destroyed her 7-year career. Her hand trembled as she pulled her phone from her pocket. The screen lit up with a photo of Noah in his school uniform, his smile a painful reminder. She dialed his number, and each ring felt like an eternity. Noah answered on the third ring. "Grace, why are you calling? Is your shift over already?" His surprised voice came through the line. Grace bit her lip hard to stop a sob from escaping. "Noah, something happened at work. I am coming home early. I will explain everything when I get there." There was a pause on the other end. His voice became tight with worry. "Are you all right? You sound strange." "I am fine," Grace lied, forcing her voice to sound as normal as possible. "I am just tired. Keep working on your homework. I will be there soon." She ended the call before he could ask more. She knew another second of his voice would make her break down on the crowded Manhattan street. Grace walked to the bus stop, each step feeling weighted down. She sat on the cold bench, watching taxis pass and people hurry by in their coats. The world moved on, but hers had just fallen apart. 7 years. She had dedicated 7 years to the monarch. 7 years of long nights and difficult customers. 7 years of forced smiles. And it all disappeared because of one plate of salmon. The bus pulled up. Grace boarded mechanically, paid her fare, and took a seat in the back. She stared out at the blurry city lights. The numbers began to add up in her mind. Her Brooklyn apartment rent was due. This month's utility bills were unpaid. The debt from her mother's cancer treatment was still over $50,000. Noah's private school tuition cost nearly $1,000 a month, even with a scholarship. And now she was jobless. Worse, she had angered the Blackwood family. Rumor said they could make anyone in the city vanish. Who would risk hiring her after this? News would travel fast in the restaurant industry. No one would employ someone who dumped food on a customer, especially when that customer was Eleanor Blackwood. Grace felt her throat close up. She had defended her dignity, but at what cost? What would this mean for Noah? He was only 14 and dreamed of being a doctor. He needed a good education. She had promised their dying mother she would provide for him. Tears streamed down her face and she turned toward the window to hide them. Was she selfish? Did she value her pride more than her brother's future? But then she saw Eleanor's smug expression as she demanded Grace kneel. She recalled the humiliation of being told to lie. She knew if she had to choose again, she would do the exact same thing. Some things, like your dignity, could never be surrendered. The bus stopped near her building. Grace got off, taking a sharp breath of the cold Brooklyn air. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring or how she would pay their bills. But she knew one thing for sure. She had to face Noah and tell him everything. That felt like the hardest task of all. Grace opened the door to their small studio. The comforting scent of a vanilla candle Noah always lit filled the air. He was at his desk, but his books were pushed away. He had clearly been too worried to study since her call. The moment he saw her, Noah was on his feet, his eyes scanning her for any sign of harm. "Are you okay?" he asked instantly, his voice thick with concern. "You said something happened. What was it? Did someone hurt you?" Grace looked at her brother. At 14, he was nearly her height. His face still had a boyish look, but his eyes were old with the losses they had shared. She removed her coat, hung it up, and sat on their worn-out sofa. She patted the space beside her. "Come here," Grace said gently. "I will tell you what happened." Noah sat next to her, tense and still. Grace took a deep breath and began her story. She started with Eleanor Blackwood's arrogant entrance, the cutting remarks, the mounting humiliation, and the moment Eleanor faked the wine spill to blame her. Grace explained how Richard Porter insisted she apologize. She described the ultimatum to choose between her job and her dignity. And finally, she told him about dropping the salmon on the powerful woman's head. When she finished, The apartment was quiet. Noah sat with his lips pressed together, his eyes growing dark. Grace knew that look. It was how he contained his anger and fear. "You lost your job," Noah said. It was a statement, not a question. "Yes," Grace confessed. "I did." "So how are we going to survive?" His voice trembled. "The rent is next month, and my tuition, and the hospital bills." Grace's heart ached as he recited the burdens a 14-year-old should not have to carry. "I will find a new job," she said, trying to sound confident. "I have 7 years of experience. Someone will hire me." "But you angered the Blackwoods," Noah replied bluntly. "Everyone knows who they are. No one will touch a person they despise." Grace had no answer because she knew he was right. Then Noah did something that completely stunned her. He turned and looked directly at her. Instead of fear or blame, his eyes held a different light. "You did the right thing," Noah said, his voice so firm it shocked her. "She had no right to treat you that way. No one can make you kneel for something you did not do." "Noah," she began, but he interrupted her. "Do you remember what Mom said?" Noah asked. "She always told us money comes and goes, but once you lose your self-respect, you can never get it back. Their mother always said you can be poor, but you can never be a coward." His words brought tears to Grace's eyes. She saw her mother in that hospital bed, wasted by treatments, still insisting they live with their heads held high. "I am afraid I was selfish," Grace whispered. "I am scared that my pride will make you pay the price." Noah shook his head firmly. "I would quit school before I let you be degraded like that," he said. "I would work 2 jobs. I would eat ramen noodles every single day. I would do anything before I let you bow to a woman like that. For the last 3 years, you are the one who has raised me. You gave up everything for me, and I am proud of you. My sister is not someone who backs down from injustice." Grace could not stop herself. She wrapped her arms around her brother, holding him tightly. Noah held her back, his own shoulders shaking with silent sobs. In their small apartment, they held each other against the endless Manhattan night. They had no money. No, they had no influence. But they had each other, and Grace knew that was enough. "We will be all right," she whispered. Noah simply nodded. "I believe you. If the whole world abandons us, we will still have each other." That night, they slept on the small couch together, just like they did after their mother passed away, when the quiet rooms felt too lonely. Grace had no idea her life was about to be turned completely upside down. The morning sun cut through a crack in the worn curtains, waking Grace from an uneasy sleep. Noah was still asleep beside her. His quiet breathing filled the tiny apartment. Grace slipped away to make coffee, trying to ignore the reality that was waiting for her. Suddenly, her phone vibrated violently. The screen showed the name Diane, her best friend from work. Grace took a breath and answered. "Grace, oh my God, are you online right now?" Diane's voice was rushed, as if she had been running. "You need to see this. Your video is everywhere." "What video?" Grace's heart began to race. "The video from last night," Diane said, almost yelling. "Somebody filmed the entire incident. It has exploded online. Millions of people have seen it. The Brave Girl hashtag is trending #1. Grace almost dropped her phone. She quickly opened the app and stared in disbelief. The clip of her pouring food on Eleanor Blackwood had over 5 million views. The number was climbing every second. Comments poured in like a flood. "You are a hero," one message said. "Someone finally stood up to those arrogant rich people." "I would have done the same thing," wrote another. "Dignity is not for sale." But not everyone was on her side. "She is unprofessional," one comment read. "It does not matter how a customer acts, you never do that. She should be fired." Another person added that she would never work in this city again. The public was completely divided, arguing in the comments. Her supporters called her a hero for fighting against class inequality. Her opponents said she was impulsive and had just ruined her own life. But everyone agreed on one thing. The girl had guts of steel. Grace scrolled down, and her breath caught when she saw the Blackwood name. "She is finished," someone wrote. Does she have any idea who the Blackwoods are? They do not forgive. She messed with Nathaniel Blackwood's mother, another commented with a skull icon. The story was not just online. In the quiet VIP rooms of exclusive clubs and in secret meetings, the tale of the waitress who defied the Blackwoods spread like a wildfire. Did you hear? A casino owner asked his associate. Some girl dumped a plate of food on Eleanor Blackwood in front of 100 people. That is insane, the partner replied. Does she not know about her late husband? Or what her son controls? Or maybe she knows and did it anyway. The owner sipped his drink. And that is what makes it terrifying. In the city's underworld, people respected boldness, but not foolishness. No one knew which one Grace Mitchell was. Some figured she would be gone within a week. Others believed the Blackwoods would make her an example to anyone who dared to challenge them. But one thing was certain. For the first time in decades, someone had openly disgraced a member of the city's most powerful family. Grace sat on a cheap chair in her kitchen, feeling like a spectator in her own life. She never wanted to be famous or the topic of a public debate. She just wanted to be treated with basic human respect. But it was too late. The entire world knew her name, and so did the Blackwoods. Noah woke up. "What are you looking at?" he asked. Grace had no answer. She did not know that across the city, a man was watching the same video over and over with an unreadable expression. In a penthouse that overlooked Manhattan like a kingdom, sunlight streamed through reinforced glass. The space was filled with dark, expensive furniture and priceless art. Nathaniel Blackwood stood before the window with a cup of black coffee. At 36, he commanded the empire his father built. He was tall, with broad shoulders and black hair slicked back. His face had a jawline chiseled from granite, and his eyes were the color of a winter storm. In the corporate world, he was a genius businessman with five-star hotels and luxury real estate. But in the underworld, his name made grown men bow their heads. He was nothing like his father, who used violence to display his influence. He preferred quiet calculation and patience. His enemies were often defeated before they even knew a war had begun. A rap on the door broke the silence. Nathaniel did not turn, already certain of the visitor. "Enter, Marcus," he said, his voice level and still. Marcus Chen entered, his black suit impeccable as always. His face was a neutral mask, perfected over 10 years as Nathaniel's right hand. "Boss, I have something," Marcus said, placing his phone on the glass table. "I forwarded this video to you last night, but I assume you have not seen it." Nathaniel turned, raising a single eyebrow. "What video?" "It concerns your mother," Marcus answered. "An incident occurred at the Monarch last night." Nathaniel placed his coffee cup down, walked to the table, and picked up the phone. He pressed play. The room became silent as the clip ran. Nathaniel watched it from start to finish without a word, his expression unreadable. When it was over, he said nothing. He simply dragged the slider back to the beginning and watched it again and again. Marcus stood by, hiding his curiosity behind a professional calm. He had prepared for rage and orders for retaliation. He expected a command to locate the defiant waitress and destroy her life. But nothing of the sort happened. Instead, on the fifth viewing, Nathaniel paused the video and zoomed in on a single moment. It was the instant before Grace lifted the plate, staring directly into Eleanor's eyes, without a shred of fear. "What do you see in her eyes?" Marcus finally asked, breaking the silence. Nathaniel did not respond immediately. He stared at the screen, at a stranger's eyes challenging his mother, his family, and the untouchable power they represented. Then, something Marcus never expected occurred. Nathaniel smiled. It was not the cold smile for his enemies or the polite one for business partners. This was a true smile, a corner of his mouth lifting with genuine amusement, perhaps even admiration. "She is not afraid," Nathaniel said, his voice holding a quality Marcus had never heard. "My mother threatens her. The manager threatens her job. The entire restaurant is watching, yet she shows no fear. She knows who our family is, but she stands her ground and does what she believes is right. Marcus nodded slowly. She is either very brave or very foolish, Nathaniel continued. He liked that. He respected people who refused to bow. His entire life, Nathaniel had seen people crumble before the Blackwood name. Politicians and titans of industry, men the world considered powerful, all lowered their heads to his family. He was accustomed to the fear and obedience in people's eyes, and he despised it. He hated the lies and the cowardice behind their respectful masks. But this young woman, an ordinary waitress with no wealth or influence, had done what none of them ever dared. Marcus, Nathaniel said, setting the phone down and meeting his aide's gaze, I want a complete file on her. Name, address, background, family, everything. Immediately, boss, Marcus replied. May I ask why? What are your intentions? Nathaniel returned to the window, looking down at the city far below. I am not sure yet, he said. But anyone who can face the Blackwood family without trembling is someone I need to meet. She is unlike anyone I have known, and that makes me curious. Marcus left to fulfill the order, leaving Nathaniel alone. He played the video one last time, focusing on Grace walking out of the restaurant, her head held high. Her calm in the center of the storm was captivating. For the first time in years, Nathaniel Blackwood felt something stir in his cold heart. Less than 1 hour after Marcus departed, Nathaniel's phone rang. He saw the caller ID read Mother and knew the call would be difficult. He took a deep breath and answered. Nathaniel, Eleanor's voice was sharp. Have you seen the video? Have you seen what that server did to me? I have seen it, Nathaniel replied calmly. Then why have you done nothing? Eleanor practically shrieked. You must find that girl and ruin her. I want her blacklisted from every job in this country. I want her to kneel and apologize to me publicly. She will learn what happens when you cross the Blackwood family. Nathaniel remained silent for a long moment. Are you listening to me, Nathaniel? Eleanor demanded. I am, he said, and my answer is no. The silence on the line was so complete, he thought she had disconnected. Then her voice returned, low and dangerous. What did you just say? I said no, Mother, Nathaniel repeated, his tone as casual as if discussing the weather. I will not ruin her. Eleanor laughed, a bitter, disbelieving sound. You are defending the employee who poured food on your mother. Have you lost your mind, Nathaniel? The world is laughing at me. That video is everywhere. Our family's honor is at stake, and you will do nothing. Is it the family's honor or yours? Nathaniel asked. Because the video shows that you initiated the conflict. You belittled her all evening. You spilled wine on your own dress and blamed her. You demanded she kneel for an offense you invented. When she refused to submit, you called it an insult to our name. Nathaniel Blackwood, Eleanor gasped, her voice shaking with fury. How dare you speak to me that way? I am only speaking the truth, Mother. And the truth is that you went too far. I have ignored your poor treatment of service staff many times. I have pretended not to see you humiliate people you feel are beneath you. But I cannot ignore this, because that girl did nothing wrong. She was defending her dignity. Dignity? Eleanor scoffed. Eleanor. A poor waitress has no dignity. What is she compared to our family? She is a human being, Mother, Nathaniel said, his voice growing colder. And you seem to have forgotten that long ago. You have been surrounded by wealth and power for so long, you forget the people who serve you are also human. They have families and dreams. They have self-respect. They are not objects for you to crush when you are bored. You are choosing a waitress over your own mother, Eleanor screamed, her voice cracking. I am choosing what is right over what is wrong, Nathaniel replied. If you cannot accept that, it is your problem, not mine. Fine, Eleanor said, her voice now a threat. If you will not do it, I will do it myself. I have enough influence to make that girl's life a living hell. You will do nothing, Nathaniel interrupted, his tone shifting from calm to ice. This is not a request, Mother. It is an order. You will not touch her. You will not touch her family or anything associated with her. If you defy me on this, you will have to deal with me, not as your son, but as the head of the Blackwood family." The following silence was heavy. In his 36 years, Nathaniel had never spoken to his mother with such authority. He had never used his power against her. Both of them understood that their relationship had just changed forever. "You will regret this, Nathaniel," Eleanor said, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and pain. "I do not know what hold that waitress has on you, but I will find out." She hung up before he could respond. He stood in the quiet penthouse staring at the phone. He had just protected a stranger over his own mother. Strangely, he felt no regret. 3 days passed like 3 centuries. Grace visited 17 different restaurants across Manhattan and Brooklyn, from elite establishments like the Monarch to small diners. The outcome was always the same. Initially, things went well. Managers were impressed with her 7 years of experience and positive references, seeming ready to hire her immediately. The interview would be going well. Then they would ask for her name, Grace Mitchell. And just like that, a wall came down. Their friendly eyes went cold. Their smiles disappeared. Practiced excuses followed. "We will be in touch," they would say. But she knew they would never call. "The job is filled," they would lie, even with a help wanted sign in the window. "You are not a match for our brand," they said, offering no real reason. By the 17th restaurant, Grace was too tired to pretend she did not understand. The manager at a small diner in Queens finally gave her the truth. "Miss Mitchell, I am so sorry, but no one in this town will hire you. Your name is on a list. We all know what happened with Mrs. Blackwood. That family can close a business with a single phone call. I have a family. I cannot take that risk. I am truly sorry." Grace walked out of that diner, and her feet felt heavy as stone. She had expected this. But hearing the words out loud, knowing an entire industry had shut her out, felt like a physical blow. Back home, Grace looked at her bank account. The number was shrinking every day. This month's rent was covered. But what about next month? The utility bill was coming. Medical debt was due in 2 weeks, and Noah's tuition had to be paid in a month. With the money she had, Grace could survive for 6 weeks. That meant cutting every expense to the bone. No meals out, no purchases that were not essential. But what would happen after those 6 weeks if no one hired her? 6 months or 6 years would make no difference. Noah saw the stress, even when Grace tried to conceal it. He watched her wake at 5 each morning to search for work. He saw her return home, her eyes red and her smile forced. He saw her at the kitchen table late at night, staring at a stack of bills. But he never asked. He did not want to add to her burden. Instead, he ate less for breakfast. He lied and said his school offered free lunches, so he needed no food from home. He turned his lights off early to conserve power. He also searched online for part-time jobs, knowing Grace would forbid it. On the third night, Grace sat alone in the dark after Noah was asleep. She looked at their small studio apartment. It was the only home they had left after their parents passed away. It was not big or fancy, but it was theirs. It represented years of careful saving. Now, she was thinking about selling it. Selling would clear their medical bills and leave enough to rent a small room. It would keep Noah in school while she figured things out. But it also meant losing their last link to their parents, losing the memories of family meals and her mother's laugh, losing the image of her father reading by the window. Grace rested her head on the table. Her body shook, not with tears, but with pure exhaustion. She fought to protect her dignity, but it might cost her everything. She did not know how much longer she could endure. On the fourth morning, Grace left the apartment holding a new list of potential jobs. She planned to try farther away, maybe in a different state where the Blackwood name meant nothing. As she locked the door, she froze. A polished black Maybach was parked in front of her building. It looked like a diamond in a field of gravel in her working-class neighborhood. A car like that was worth $500,000. 10 times the value of her home. Grace's heart pounded when the door opened. An Asian man in a perfect black suit stepped out. She knew him immediately from the photos she had seen online while researching the Blackwood family. He was Marcus Chen, Nathaniel Blackwood's most trusted man. Rumor said he once made an entire gang disappear overnight. Grace instinctively stepped back, her body hitting the wooden door. They had come for revenge. This was the end she had feared for 3 days. She thought about Noah inside and prayed he would not open the door. "Miss Mitchell," Marcus said. His voice was oddly calm for someone facing a terrified woman. "I am not here to harm you." Grace stayed silent, her eyes darting around, searching for an escape she knew did not exist. "I have something for you," Marcus said, reaching into his suit. Grace held her breath, but he did not pull out a weapon. He held a small black business card with shiny gold letters. He took a few steps toward her, stopping at a polite distance. He offered the card to Grace. "Nathaniel Blackwood wants to see you." Grace looked at the card as if it were a deadly snake. "See me for what?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "To threaten me in person? To detail how your family will destroy my life?" "No," Marcus answered plainly. "Mr. Blackwood just wants to talk." A bitter laugh escaped Grace's lips. "Talk?" she repeated sharply. "The son of the woman I humiliated wants to talk to me, and you expect me to believe that?" Marcus did not seem insulted. His expression was as calm as a quiet pond. "Miss Mitchell, if Mr. Blackwood wanted to hurt you, he would not send me with a business card. You know the Blackwood name can open any door in this city. It can also close any door. You have experienced that for the past 3 days." Grace winced at his words. He knew about her interviews. He knew about every rejection. They had been watching her all along. "If this is not a threat, then what is it?" she asked, her voice still tense. "I do not know," Marcus replied with honesty. "Mr. Blackwood did not explain. He only said he wished to see you. He told me to assure you this is an invitation, not a command. You can refuse." Grace stared into his eyes, looking for a lie. She saw only the professional calm of a man who controlled his emotions. "And if I refuse?" she asked. "Then I will leave, and you will not see me again." Marcus spoke plainly. "Miss Mitchell, I want to be honest with you. I have worked for the Blackwood family for more than 10 years. This is the first time Nathaniel has ever asked me to invite someone personally. He usually ignores everyone outside of his business, but you have made him curious." And curiosity from Nathaniel Blackwood was a rare thing. Grace accepted the card. Her fingers shook as they brushed against its cold, smooth surface. The address was for Blackwood Tower, the famous Manhattan skyscraper she had seen from a distance 1,000 times. She never imagined she would set foot inside. "When?" she asked. The word surprised her. "Whenever you are ready," Marcus answered, motioning to the Maybach. "But I can take you there right now if you agree to come." Grace looked back at her apartment door. Noah was still sleeping inside. A pile of bills sat on the table. Her future was a blur. She had nothing more to lose. She had already lost almost everything. "All right," she said. She wondered if she was walking into a trap or grabbing a lifeline. "Give me 5 minutes to text my brother." The Maybach moved silently through the streets of Manhattan. It carried Grace from working-class Brooklyn into the very center of the city's power. Marcus said nothing during the trip, and Grace was not in the mood to speak. She just stared out the window as the skyscrapers passed like ghosts in a dream, asking herself what she was doing. When the car finally stopped in front of Blackwood Tower, Grace had to lean her head back until her neck hurt just to see its peak. 72 floors of glass and steel shot into the sky like a giant blade. The building reflected the bright sun so fiercely it was painful to look at. This was the monument to Blackwood power, a quiet statement that the family was above everyone else. Marcus guided her through the main lobby. The polished black marble floors mirrored their reflections like a dark, still lake. Employees in flawless uniforms nodded at Marcus as they walked by. Their eyes glanced at Grace with a carefully hidden curiosity. A private elevator took them to the 72nd floor. Grace felt her ears pop from the rapid change in pressure. When the doors slid open, she entered another world entirely. The penthouse was as big as a field. It had impossibly high ceilings and glass walls that offered a view over all of Manhattan. The design was luxurious and dark, with art that cost millions of dollars and antiques that belonged in a museum. The very air felt different, heavier, as if the walls breathed power and danger. "Please wait here," Marcus said, before vanishing through a heavy oak door. Grace stood by herself, feeling like a tiny fish lost in the ocean. She did not dare to sit on the expensive leather couches. She did not dare to touch a single thing. She just stood still and tried to quiet her heart, which was beating like a drum. Then, she heard footsteps. Nathaniel Blackwood emerged from the same door Marcus had used. In that instant, Grace understood why people feared him. It was not just his height, though he was nearly a head taller than her. It was not just his sharp, cold face, which looked as if it were carved from stone. It was his eyes. They were gray, as cold as a winter storm and as sharp as a knife. They seemed to cut right through her, reading every secret she had. They were the eyes of a man who had seen too much and done too much to be shocked by anything. "Miss Mitchell," Nathaniel said. His voice was low and steady, like water moving beneath a sheet of ice. "Thank you for coming." Grace swallowed hard, fighting to keep her voice from trembling. "I'm not sure I had much of a choice, Mr. Blackwood." Nathaniel tilted his head. Something moved in his frozen eyes, but it disappeared too quickly for Grace to understand. "You did have a choice," he stated. "Marcus told you it was an invitation, not a command." "Then why did you ask me here?" Grace asked, tired of the games. "To tell me personally that you plan to destroy my life because I offended your mother?" Nathaniel did not respond immediately. He walked to the glass wall and stared down at the city far below him, with his back turned to Grace. "I have watched that video several times," he said, "and there is something I do not understand." "What is that?" Grace asked. "Why did you do it?" Nathaniel turned to face her again. "You knew who my mother was. You knew what my family is capable of. You knew you would lose your job and be blacklisted from this industry. You knew all of that, and yet you still did it. Why?" Grace looked into those cold gray eyes. Strangely, she did not feel the fear she had expected. Perhaps it was because she had lost so much that there was nothing left to be afraid of. "Because I am not something for people to walk on," she said. Her voice was clear and strong in the huge room. "Your mother might be wealthy. She might be powerful. She might make this entire city bow to her. But that does not give her the right to humiliate me. It does not give her the right to demand that I kneel for something I did not do. I may be poor, I may be just a waitress, but I am still a person, and my dignity is not for sale." A deep silence filled the room after she spoke. Nathaniel remained perfectly still, his eyes locked on her, but something in his gaze was starting to change. A tiny crack was forming in the ice. "You know," he said after a long pause, "I have met thousands of people in my life. I have met politicians and executives, the very people this world considers powerful. Every single one of them bows to my family. Every one of them would sell their soul for a small advantage. But you, a waitress, dared to stand up straight and say no. You were willing to risk everything to protect something that most people have already lost: self-respect." He paused for a moment. What he did next took Grace completely by surprise. He smiled. It was not a cold or mocking smile. It was a genuine smile that completely changed his sharp features. He looked younger, more human. "And that, Miss Mitchell," Nathaniel said, "makes me very curious about you." The smile vanished as quickly as it had appeared, and his cold mask returned. He walked over to a black oak desk, pulled out a file, and placed it on the table in front of her. "I have a proposal for you," he said. Grace looked at the file with open suspicion. "What kind of proposal?" "Are you familiar with the Sterling?" Nathaniel asked. Grace nodded. Anyone in the restaurant industry knew the Sterling. It was a five-star restaurant inside the Blackwood Grand Hotel, located in the heart of Manhattan. A single meal there cost more than she earned in a month at the Monarch. The current manager of the Sterling has just resigned, Nathaniel continued. I require a replacement, and I want you to be that person. Grace was certain she had misheard him. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Nathaniel Blackwood, the son of the woman she had poured food on, was offering her a manager position at one of the finest restaurants in New York. Is this a joke? She finally asked. I do not joke, Nathaniel answered, especially about business. But why? Grace asked, her voice filled with disbelief. I publicly shamed your mother. That video is all over the internet. My name is blacklisted in this entire industry, and you want to hire me? None of this makes sense. Nathaniel observed her for a moment before he spoke. You have 7 years of experience with a perfect record, not one single complaint against you. That is uncommon. And you possess something I look for in a manager but can almost never find. What is that? A spine, Nathaniel said. Someone who will defend what is right, even when it comes at a great cost. That is the kind of person I need. I want someone who will not yield to difficult customers simply because they have money, someone who values standards and principles more than profit. The Sterling needs a person like that. Grace still could not believe it. And your mother? She will never agree to this. My mother does not decide who I employ, Nathaniel replied, his voice growing colder when he mentioned Eleanor. This is my company, not hers. Grace looked down at the file and opened it. She almost gasped when she saw the offered salary. It was 5 times what she had earned at the Monarch. It was enough to pay off her medical debt in 2 years. It was enough for Noah to continue his education without financial worries. It was enough for them to have a comfortable life she had never even dared to dream about. But she knew that nothing this good ever came for free, especially from a man like him. What do you want from me? Grace asked, meeting his gaze directly. Nobody gives something for nothing. So what is the real price? What do I have to do for this job? Move illegal money? Cover up crimes? Or something worse? Nathaniel did not seem bothered by her blunt question. He seemed to be studying her again, his intense gaze searching her face. You truly are not afraid of anything, he said. It was a statement, not a question. I have already lost too much to fear losing more, Grace answered. But I will not sell my integrity. I would rather be blacklisted than do something illegal. If that is what you think this is about, you have misjudged me. Nathaniel paused for a moment. He nodded slowly, as if he had confirmed something. Good, he said. Then this is our arrangement. You will run the Sterling like a normal restaurant. It will be completely legal. No hidden money, no secret dealings. Your only job is to make it the best restaurant possible. And my terms, Grace added. I will not do anything that violates my conscience. I will not mistreat the staff or any customer. And if you ask me to do something I find wrong, I will say no, even if I lose my job. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. He was clearly not used to people making demands of him. Are you negotiating with me? I am setting my boundaries, Grace said. They are not negotiable. A silent tension filled the air as they stared at each other. Then Nathaniel let out a short laugh, as if he could not stop it. You are very different, he said. Fine. I accept your conditions. You will have total control to manage the Sterling as you see fit. I will not interfere in the daily work. If a problem arises, you can come to me directly. He extended his hand. So, do we have an agreement, Miss Mitchell? Grace looked at his hand. It belonged to a man feared throughout the city, a man rumored to have done terrible things. But she also saw a chance to change her life and Noah's. This was a chance that might not come again. She reached out, her hand meeting his. We have a deal, Mr. Blackwood. His hand was warm and strong, his grip serious but not painful. In that instant, Grace felt the world shift. A new door had opened, leading down a road she could not see. Call me Nathaniel, he said. Grace nodded. Then you should call me Grace. Her first 2 weeks at the Sterling were the most difficult of her life. The staff watched her with cold suspicion. They whispered behind her back about the video, wondering why Nathaniel Blackwood would ever hire someone like her. They decided she was his lover, or even worse, a tool he was using to hurt his mother. Grace ignored the gossip. She poured everything into her work, guided by the simple rule her parents taught her. Every single person deserves respect. She met with each employee, from the head chef to the dishwasher. She listened to their problems, learned their children's names, and asked about their families. She adjusted schedules so parents could get home on time. She lengthened break times, improved their meals, and stood up for her team against difficult customers. One night, a wealthy man, drunk on expensive liquor, screamed at a young server until she cried. Her crime was an appetizer that arrived 2 minutes late. Grace walked to his table and, in a calm, firm voice, asked him to leave. When the man threatened to phone Nathaniel Blackwood, Grace simply smiled and invited him to do so, before walking him to the door herself. That story moved through the restaurant like a spark. After that night, the staff's view of her completely transformed. She was no longer an outsider who had stolen a job. She was a real leader, someone who would stand in front of them and absorb the blow. The Sterling's profits started to climb each week. This was not because of a clever marketing plan, but because of a simple truth. Happy employees give better service, and customers who feel cared for always come back. 5-star reviews filled websites, praising the amazing food and the warm professional team. And Nathaniel Blackwood began to show up more often. At first, he claimed he was checking on the business. He would sit at his corner table with a glass of whiskey, watching her work with his sharp, calculating eyes. But soon his visits became longer. The pretense of business checks slowly gave way to simple conversation. Their talks usually started after the restaurant closed. When the staff was gone and the dining room was peaceful and dark, Grace would make coffee for herself and pour Nathaniel a whiskey. They would sit together by the window, watching the glittering lights of Manhattan. They talked about work, about life, and their different views of the world. He asked about her younger brother Noah and the medical bills she was still trying to pay. She asked about his family's empire, the pressure of his legacy, and the loneliness she saw deep inside him. Nathaniel was most astonished by her complete honesty. Grace was never afraid to tell him the truth. If she thought a business decision was a mistake, she said so. When he acted with arrogance or coldness, she pointed it out. One night, Nathaniel complained about a partner who had dared to refuse his offer. His voice held a clear threat of what that person would suffer. Grace set her coffee down and looked directly at him. "People have a right to say no," she said. "Even to Nathaniel Blackwood. Someone disagreeing with you is not an insult. It just means they have a different opinion. A good leader listens to other opinions instead of threatening those who are brave enough to voice them." Anyone else who had spoken those words to him would have faced terrible consequences. But with Grace, he just fell silent for a long moment. Then, he slowly nodded. "You are right," he admitted. It was the first time in his entire life Nathaniel Blackwood had said he was wrong to another person. Marcus Chen, who stood silently in the corner whenever Nathaniel was there, watched the exchange with pure amazement. He had worked for Nathaniel for more than 10 years. He had seen his boss handle enemies, partners, and women who wanted his power and money. But he had never seen him like this. He had never seen his boss truly listen to someone, or genuinely laugh, or share things he had kept buried for so long. Grace Mitchell was doing what no one else ever had. She was reaching the real man hidden behind the cold mask. Marcus could not tell if this was good or bad. He only knew one thing was certain. Everything was about to change. When life shifted around Nathaniel Blackwood, the entire city had to shift with him. One Friday evening, Noah appeared at the Sterling without warning. Grace was reviewing the weekend reservation list when the main doors opened. Her 14-year-old brother walked in, a school backpack slung over his shoulder, wearing his usual bright smile. He called out to her. "Grace, I came to get you. I finished my last exam early, so I thought it would be a nice surprise." Grace started to rush toward him for a hug, but she stopped. She saw Nathaniel at his regular corner table. He held a glass of whiskey, and his gray eyes watched Noah with intense curiosity. Noah also noticed the strange man. He paused his approach, and a protective instinct made him move closer to his sister. "Who is that man?" Grace took a deep breath, uncertain how to make the introduction. "This is Nathaniel Blackwood," she said. "He owns this restaurant, and this is my brother, Noah." Noah's eyes went wide at the name Blackwood. He knew instantly that this was the son of the woman Grace had humiliated in that video. He stared at Nathaniel with a guarded look, his body tensing as if ready to defend his sister. But Nathaniel did not act threatening. He stood and walked toward them, his expression softening in a way Grace had never seen. "So, you are the brother Grace speaks of," he said. "She mentioned you want to become a doctor." Noah remained silent, still evaluating the man before him. Then he raised his chin and met Nathaniel's gaze with a courage far beyond his 14 years. "Yes, I will be a doctor to help people like my mother. I want to help those who cannot afford proper medical treatment." Nathaniel tilted his head, a flicker of something new in his cold eyes. "That is a noble ambition," he said. "How are your grades in school?" Noah answered without a hint of arrogance. "I am at the top of my class. I have a partial scholarship now and plan to earn a full one for college. My sister will not have to worry about me." Pride swelled in Grace's chest as she watched her brother. He had been forced to grow up so quickly over the last 3 years. He had endured so much loss, yet clung to his hope and his resolve. Nathaniel observed them both for a moment, then turned to Grace. "You should go home with your brother," he said. "I have nothing else to discuss with you tonight." Grace nodded thankfully and led Noah out of the building. On the way home, Noah was quiet for a very long time before he finally spoke. "The way he looks at you is strange," he said. "How is it strange?" Grace asked him. "I am not sure how to describe it," Noah replied with a shrug. "But I have never seen anyone look at you that way. Like you are the most valuable thing in the room." Grace did not respond, but she felt her cheeks grow warm in the darkness. A week later, Noah ran home looking completely stunned. "Grace," he shouted, "the school called me to the office today. Someone paid my tuition in full, all the way through high school graduation. They would not tell me who, but they said I do not have to worry about money any longer. I can just focus on my studies." Grace knew at once who was responsible. That night, she stayed late at the Sterling, waiting for Nathaniel. When he arrived at his usual table, she brought him his whiskey and sat down across from him. "Why did you do it?" she asked directly. Nathaniel made no attempt to misunderstand her. "Because the boy deserves it," he answered plainly. "And because I am able to." Grace's voice was sharp. "I do not need your charity." Nathaniel met her gaze. "It is not charity. It is an investment. I invest in people who I believe will accomplish something important, and Noah will be an excellent doctor. I am sure of it." Grace wanted to protest, to insist she did not need his assistance, but something in his gray eyes made her stop. She saw no pity, no effort to control her. There was only a sincerity she had never seen in him. "Thank you," she said at last. The 2 words carried all the feelings she could not express. They talked through the entire night, for longer than they ever had. Nathaniel told her about his father, the man who built the Blackwood Empire from nothing. He also taught Nathaniel that emotion was a weakness. "He never hugged me," Nathaniel said, his voice low in the dark room. "He never said he loved me." There were only lessons on power and survival. "When he died, I did not know if I felt sad. I only knew I had to take his place. I had to become the man he demanded I be." Grace told him about her own parents. She spoke of the happy years when her family was complete, the shock of her mother's cancer, and the long nights spent holding her hand in the hospital. She described the car crash that took both their lives in an instant, and she mentioned the scar on her wrist. It was a reminder of a violent relationship she had to escape. When she pulled back her sleeve and showed him the mark, his eyes grew dangerously dark. "Where is he?" Nathaniel asked, his voice like cold steel. "You do not need to know that," Grace answered. "It is in the past. I survived it." Nathaniel said nothing more, but his finger traced the scar on her wrist. His touch was so gentle, as if he feared he might hurt her. In that moment, with the faint city lights filtering through the window, Grace saw a new side of Nathaniel Blackwood. She saw his tenderness. They spoke until the Manhattan sky turned from black to purple, then to pink. Dawn finally flooded the restaurant, breaking the darkness. When they left, an invisible line now connected them, two lonely souls who had found one another in a city of millions. The news that Nathaniel had promoted Grace to manager of the Sterling finally reached Eleanor. She heard it from Sophia Harrington, who had gone to the restaurant for dinner and instantly recognized the waitress from the viral video was now in charge of the whole establishment. Sophia immediately called Eleanor, her voice dripping with poison. "Eleanor, do you know what your son is doing? He did not just hire that girl. He has been visiting her nearly every day. The entire city is whispering that they are together." Eleanor almost threw her phone against the wall. She had convinced herself that Nathaniel was just acting out, that his fascination with the waitress would fade. But this was too much. Not only had he hired her, but he was seeing her constantly. It was a line Eleanor could not accept. One quiet Tuesday afternoon, the doors of the Sterling opened, and Eleanor Blackwood entered. She wore a lavish black dress. Her platinum hair was styled perfectly, and each step of her expensive heels echoed on the marble floor like a threat. Grace was inspecting the tables for a banquet that evening when she saw the woman and froze. She knew Eleanor immediately. That face had tormented her for many sleepless nights. "So this is the little thing who has my son under her spell," Eleanor announced, her voice ringing through the quiet restaurant. The staff, who were preparing for the dinner service, all stopped to stare. "I must admit, you are more clever than I imagined. You did not just pour food on me. You found your way into my son's bed to secure your position." Heat flooded Grace's face, but she controlled her fury. "Mrs. Blackwood," she said, her voice steady, "please leave my restaurant." Eleanor laughed, her tone full of scorn. "Your restaurant? This is a Blackwood restaurant. It is my son's, and you are just a girl playing manager." A few employees gasped in shock. Grace moved closer until she was directly in front of Eleanor, and she did not retreat a single inch. She knew this woman could destroy her with one call. "I will say it again," Grace said clearly. "Please leave now." Eleanor stepped forward, her eyes filled with malice. "Who do you think you are?" she whispered, her voice low enough for only Grace to hear. "Do you believe Nathaniel actually cares for you? He is just using you to anger me. When he grows tired of you, you will be a broke waitress again. But this time, I will make sure you never recover, and neither will your precious little brother. I hear he is at a private school, dreaming of becoming a doctor. It would be a terrible shame if something were to happen to that dream." When Eleanor mentioned Noah, Grace felt a cold dread wash over her. She could handle any attack on herself, but her brother was the one person no one could touch. Her voice trembled with pure rage. "If you lay a hand on my brother, I swear." Eleanor just laughed. "What will you do? Pour more food on me?" Suddenly, the doors burst open. Nathaniel strode in, his face a mask of fury. Marcus followed closely, having clearly called his boss about the situation. "Mother," Nathaniel said. The single word was filled with menace. Eleanor turned to her son, a smile still on her face. "Nathaniel, what perfect timing. I was just speaking with your employee." Nathaniel's voice was sharp and final. "Step outside with me. Now." After a final, hateful glance at Grace, Eleanor followed him. Their argument erupted on the sidewalk. "You crossed a line," Nathaniel stated. "I told you not to touch her." "She is using you," his mother shrieked. "I am protecting you." "You are protecting your own pride," he answered coldly. "Grace is not using me. She wants nothing from me. She is the only one who talks to me like a person, not a boss or a bank. And what am I to you? Eleanor asked, her voice shaking. For 36 years, you have tried to run my life, he said. You never cared what I wanted, only what you wanted me to be. Now I have found someone who matters, and you are trying to ruin it. Eleanor was stunned into silence hearing these words from her son for the very first time. Listen to me, Mother. Nathaniel moved closer, his voice a low threat. If you harm Grace or Noah in any way, I will cut you off. You will lose access to all family money. You will have no power in this city. You know I can do it. Eleanor saw in his eyes that he was completely serious. This was not a moment of anger. It was a final decision. You will regret this, she said, her earlier confidence gone. No, Nathaniel replied. I only regret not doing this sooner. He went back inside, leaving his mother alone on the street. She finally understood she could truly lose her son. Eleanor was not a woman who accepted defeat. The fight with Nathaniel left her filled with rage. Her son had picked a waitress over her. He had threatened his own mother for a woman she saw as worthless. Back in her huge mansion, Eleanor drank glass after glass. In a drunken haze, she made a terrible choice. She telephoned Viktor Vulov, the head of a rival Russian family. The Volkov and Blackwood families had been enemies for years. Their conflict was a quiet war, with each side looking for a chance to strike. Victor, Eleanor slurred into the phone, I have information for you. My son has a weakness. Her name is Grace Mitchell, a waitress, and she has a little brother. Nathaniel cares for them deeply. She gave him the key to hurting her son. Eleanor was not thinking about the consequences. She was not thinking that she was betraying her family. She just wanted Grace gone. 3 days later, Noah disappeared. He did not come home from school. Grace called his phone again and again, but there was no answer. The school confirmed he left at 3 in the afternoon. His friends had not seen him. After 3 hours, true panic set in. Grace ran through the streets, asking everyone if they had seen her brother. Nobody had. At 8 that night, her phone buzzed. An unknown number sent a picture that made her heart stop. It was Noah, tied to a chair, his mouth taped shut, his eyes wide with fear. The message said, Tell your lover we need to talk. If you call the police, the boy is dead. Grace collapsed. Her legs gave out. She did not scream or cry. She just trembled, staring at the picture of her brother, feeling her entire world fall apart. For the first time since her parents died, she was completely lost. She had no idea how to save the only family she had left. With trembling hands, she dialed Nathaniel. He picked up on the first ring. Grace! He heard the terror in her ragged breathing. What is wrong? Noah, she whispered, her voice cracking. They have Noah. They sent me a picture. I do not know what to do, Nathaniel. Please help me. Where are you? Nathaniel's voice instantly turned hard as steel. I am at home. Stay there. I am on my way. He hung up and faced Marcus, with an expression his second-in-command had never seen. The usual calm in his gray eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, violent anger. Volkov, Nathaniel said. Just one word. Marcus understood immediately. Only the Volkov family was reckless enough to make such a move, and they must have had inside information about Grace and Noah. Get everyone, Nathaniel commanded. I want his location within 1 hour. Offer any amount of money to our sources. Tell the men to prepare. There will be blood tonight. Marcus immediately began making calls. Within 15 minutes, the entire Blackwood criminal empire was activated. Men were called in from across the city. Weapons were distributed. Cars were readied. This was not about business. This was war. Nathaniel arrived at Grace's apartment faster than seemed possible. He found her on the floor, phone clutched in her hand, staring at the photo of Noah. He knelt before her and took hold of her shaking shoulders. Grace, listen to me. Nathaniel's voice was quiet, but unbreakable. I am getting Noah back. I give you my word. Anyone who takes what is mine will not live to regret it. Grace met his gaze, her eyes swollen but tearless, as if fear had stolen her ability to weep. "I cannot lose him," she breathed. "Noah is everything I have left. I would not survive it." "You will not lose him," Nathaniel promised, his hand gently touching her face. His tone was as final as a steel spike hammered into oak. "I will burn this city to the ground if I have to." Marcus's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, and then faced Nathaniel. "We have them," Marcus reported. "An old warehouse down at the Brooklyn docks. At least 10 guards are present." Nathaniel stood, his expression becoming a cold, emotionless mask. "Tonight, the Volkov family would learn why you do not threaten the people Nathaniel Blackwood protects." The Brooklyn docks were consumed by midnight darkness, with only a few faint streetlights casting a sickly glow on the black water. The warehouse, a relic of a past industrial age, sat alone at the pier's end. It was now a cage for the boy whose sister Nathaniel cared for. A line of dark cars glided to a stop 300 meters away. Nathaniel emerged, his flawless black suit a strange sight for the violence to come. Marcus appeared at his side, offering a handgun. Nathaniel inspected the magazine before securing it at his back, his icy gray eyes scanning the building. 12 men, Marcus said quietly. 4 outside, 8 inside. The boy is on the second level, in the northeast corner. Nathaniel gave a slight nod. "I need one of them alive for questions," he stated, his voice devoid of any feeling. "The others are disposable." 20 of Blackwood's gunmen became phantoms in the night, encircling the warehouse. The 4 external guards were eliminated without a sound, their throats slit before they could raise an alarm. Nathaniel spearheaded the assault, blasting the corroded steel door from its frame and entering like a specter of death. The warehouse erupted in gunfire. Every shot was deliberate and deadly. Nathaniel moved with an unnerving calm. He downed a man aiming for him, sidestepped a shot from his left, and put 2 rounds into the shooter's chest. He was not the most skilled marksman, but he was the most ruthless. There was no hesitation, no mercy. This was the Nathaniel Blackwood hidden beneath tailored suits and polite society smiles. This was the predator his father had molded, a man who would kill without remorse to defend his own. The entire operation was over in less than 10 minutes. 8 men were sprawled on the concrete floor, their blood pooling in the dark. Only a single man was left breathing, immobilized with a shot to the leg from Marcus, and secured for questioning. Nathaniel took the stairs 2 at a time, his shoes echoing on the decaying wood. He kicked in the door to the northeast room and found Noah. The boy was tied to a chair just as he appeared in the photograph. His eyes widened with relief at the sight of Nathaniel. Nathaniel went to him, gently removing the tape from his mouth and cutting the ropes. "Are you injured?" Nathaniel's voice was suddenly soft. "I am fine," Noah replied, his voice trembling but determined. "They just made threats. Where is Grace?" "She is safe at home, waiting for you." Nathaniel helped the boy stand. "I am taking you to her now." Noah suddenly embraced Nathaniel, his small frame shaking. "I was so afraid," the boy confessed. "I tried to be strong, but I thought they would kill me." Nathaniel froze, unused to such physical contact. Then he cautiously put a hand on Noah's back. "You are safe now," he said. "No one will ever harm you again. I will make sure of it." They exited the warehouse. Marcus escorted Noah to a car to take him directly to Grace. Nathaniel remained to deal with their captive. He knelt before the man, his gray eyes like chips of ice. "Who told you about the boy and his sister?" Nathaniel asked. The man spat blood on the ground and smirked. "I know nothing." Nathaniel produced a knife from his jacket and placed the tip against the man's smallest finger. "I will ask one more time," he said softly. "For every wrong answer, you lose a finger. After that, we move to your toes, and then other parts. I have the entire night." True fear appeared on the man's face as he stared into Nathaniel's eyes and saw the absolute certainty there. Okay, okay, he yelled. It was a woman. She called Vulov. She claimed to be your mother. Nathaniel became perfectly still. He registered the words, but his mind rejected their meaning. His own mother had betrayed him, feeding information to his enemies to enable the kidnapping of a 14-year-old boy. What did she tell him? Nathaniel asked, his voice chillingly empty. She said you had a weakness, the man stammered. A waitress and her little brother. She told the boss they were the perfect leverage against you. Nathaniel rose and walked away, abandoning the man to his fate. He stepped into the sharp Brooklyn air and felt a part of his soul extinguish. He had always known his mother was arrogant, selfish, and cruel, but he never imagined she could stoop to this. She had been willing to sacrifice an innocent child's life to punish a girl who had slighted her. Nathaniel took out his phone and dialed his family's attorney. The lawyer answered, his voice groggy with sleep. I need you to execute the plan we discussed last week, Nathaniel said, his voice like stone. Revoke my mother's access to all family assets. Freeze every one of her accounts. Cancel all her credit cards. Ensure she never touches another dollar of Blackwood money. Mr. Blackwood, the lawyer started. She is your mother. Are you certain? She is no longer my mother, Nathaniel stated. As of this moment, Eleanor Blackwood is dead to me. When the car returned Noah to their apartment, Grace was already waiting outside. She ran and threw her arms around her brother, holding him so tightly Noah choked out that he could not breathe. But Grace would not let go. She just held him and wept, her body shaking with relief. I am okay, sis, Noah murmured. I am fine. Nathaniel rescued me. Grace looked up at Nathaniel, who stood a short distance away. His black suit was now stained with specks of blood. His face was weary, but his eyes softened as he watched them. She finally let go of Noah and walked to Nathaniel. Without speaking, she hugged him. Nathaniel was rigid for a moment before his arms wrapped around her, holding her as if he feared she might vanish. They stood together in the cold Brooklyn night, two survivors clinging to each other after a storm. Thank you, Grace whispered into his chest. Thank you for bringing Noah back. Thank you for your promise. Nathaniel did not reply. He simply tightened his embrace. He then gently cupped her chin, lifting her face to his. Under the weak glow of the streetlight, he looked into her eyes, still puffy from her tears. I do not know what I would have done if I had lost you, he said, his voice raw with an emotion he never showed. I have lived for 36 years without truly caring about anyone. But now, I cannot imagine a world without you in it. Grace gazed into his gray eyes, once as cold as a winter storm, but now filled with a warmth she had never seen. She said nothing. She rose on her toes and kissed him. Their first kiss was tender and soft. It was not hurried or demanding, but a quiet connection between two lonely people who had found their other half. Noah grinned from the doorway, then wisely slipped inside to leave them alone. A year had passed since that night. Grace and Nathaniel were together, though they kept their relationship private. Noah was living in a larger apartment that Nathaniel had purchased for them, a decision Grace had resisted until Nathaniel insisted it was for Noah's safety. Under Grace's leadership, the Sterling flourished, earning its place among New York's finest restaurants. But for Eleanor, life became a private prison. Nathaniel had completely cut her off, and the story spread through high society. Everyone heard that she had betrayed her son to a rival. The details were a mystery, but the outcome was clear. Eleanor had done something so terrible that her own son disowned her. Her wealthy friends vanished. Sophia Harrington, who first told her about Grace, now pretended she never knew her. The exclusive clubs she once frequented quietly canceled her membership. Invitations to lavish parties no longer arrived. Eleanor was left alone in a cold, empty mansion. She could not afford to keep the staff, so she had to let most of them go. Her personal savings were not enough to support the life she once knew. During long, sleepless nights, she would look at photos of a young Nathaniel, trying to understand where it all went wrong. After 6 months of alcohol and regret, Eleanor sought a therapist. She did not want to change, but she could no longer stand the loneliness. Those sessions, however, uncovered wounds she had buried for a lifetime. She talked about a cold mother who demanded perfection, an arranged marriage she never wanted, and a deep fear of being abandoned that made her control everyone. She finally saw that she had treated Nathaniel just as her mother had treated her. That cycle of toxicity had ruined the most important relationship in her life. Eleanor started to change, a slow and painful process. She learned to face herself honestly and accept her own faults. She understood that wealth and status did not give her the right to hurt people. After a year of therapy, she decided to do the thing she feared most. She would ask to see Grace and apologize. She sent a handwritten letter to the Sterling, asking for just 10 minutes of Grace's time. Grace held the letter for a week, unsure of what to do. This woman had almost gotten her brother killed, but she remembered her mother's words. Forgiveness was not about forgetting. It was about freeing yourself from hate. She agreed to meet Eleanor at a small cafe. Eleanor arrived looking nothing like the arrogant woman she used to be. She was thinner, and her hair was grayer. Her eyes, once filled with contempt, now held only regret. "Thank you for seeing me," Eleanor said, her voice shaking. "I know I have done nothing to deserve this, but I need to say I am sorry. I am sorry for humiliating you, for threatening you and your brother, and for what I did to Noah. I am not asking for forgiveness. I just need you to know that I regret everything." Grace looked at her, and for the first time she did not see an enemy. She saw a broken woman trying to piece her life back together. 5 years after that night at the Monarch, Grace Blackwood sat in the Maybach, watching as they approached the restaurant where her life changed forever. She was no longer the anxious 27-year-old waitress. She was Nathaniel's wife, a co-owner of a successful restaurant group, and a respected businesswoman. Nathaniel opened her door and took her hand. He was still the same handsome man she met, but his eyes were always warm when he looked at her. A platinum wedding band shone on his finger. Noah got out of the car next. He was now a tall 19-year-old, in his second year of medical school on a full scholarship. He was living his dream, and Grace knew their parents were proud. The last person to step out was Eleanor Blackwood. At 70, her hair was completely silver, and her face was softer. After 4 years of therapy and volunteering at centers for abused women, she had slowly earned a place back in the family, with clear boundaries. Richard Porter, the manager at the Monarch, almost fainted when he saw Grace. "Mrs. Blackwood," he trembled. "It is an honor." Grace smiled warmly. "A table for 4, please." They were seated at the best table, the exact one Eleanor had used 7 years ago. Grace looked around the dining room, remembering the nights her feet ached, remembering the moment she picked up that salmon plate and changed her world. "Who knew a plate of food on someone's head could lead to this?" Eleanor said with a small, self-mocking laugh. "A family, a business, and a mother-in-law with better manners." Everyone at the table laughed, even Grace. 5 years ago, she could not have imagined this moment. But people change, and Eleanor had worked hard to prove it. Noah raised his glass. "Grace, this is for you. For everything you did for me, for never giving up, and for teaching me that dignity is something no one can take away." Tears welled in Grace's eyes. She held Nathaniel's hand and Noah's hand. She looked across at Eleanor. This was her family, built from tragedy and healed by forgiveness. Nathaniel lifted his glass. "To second chances," he said, "and to the people brave enough to take them." Eleanor nodded, her eyes glistening. "And to the people kind enough to offer them," she added, looking at Grace with sincere gratitude. As they touched their glasses together, Grace watched the candlelight glow in her red wine. She remembered the wine Eleanor had spilled on her dress 7 years ago, remembering the pure injustice of it all. Life had a strange way of turning darkness into light. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what truly matters. Sometimes you must fight for yourself no matter how terrifying it is. And sometimes The person you thought was your enemy can become your family. That is the story of Grace Mitchell, the waitress who stood up for her dignity against power and wealth, and in doing so, found true happiness. This story teaches us that self-respect has no price, that people can change, and that life offers second chances to those who are brave enough to seize them. What are your thoughts on this story? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a difficult moment? Please share your experiences in the comments below. We love hearing from you. If you found this story moving, please press the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this every day. We wish you and your family health, happiness, and peace. Goodbye for now, and we will see you in the next video.